When I first read these announcements, I really felt a rare chill. Here was a deal signed quietly between Ottawa and Madrid that unlocks billions in defense secrets and industrial leverage, and barely anyone noticed this one. It's a sort of agreement that isn't meant to thrill, but to matter. I kept rereading the details, half expecting to find a catch here, because sometimes the most transformative power shifts actually arrive disguised as technicalities. Today we're pulling back the curtain on Canada's new General Security of Information Pact with Spain, a move that could redraw defense lines, rewire trade flows, and test the silent loyalties of the Atlantic Alliance. We're not just talking about some secrets here. It's about who gets to write the next chapter of transatlantic strategy. We'll look at why this agreement signals a shift in Canada's role, how it reconfigures Europe's southern defense hub, and what nobody in Washington will say out loud about it, basically. There's more at stake here than just a few contracts, however. There is a story about leverage, exclusion, and the quiet rewiring of old alliances. But let me ask you directly, if you were in Canada's shoes, or maybe you actually are, would you risk tension with Washington for the chance to diversify your alliances, or is it smarter to keep every bet hedged with your biggest neighbor? I'd love to hear what you think about all of this in the comment. How much independence is actually worth the friction, you know? Before we dive in, a very quick note. My book, Awake, The Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Self-Lies, is out now. It's not just about critical thinking, but about reclaiming clarity in a world full of noise. If you're a builder, a leader, or just somebody who wants to think more clearly under pressure, this one is definitely for you. I've also added a 24-minute companion podcast that walks through the key concepts in depth, so if you prefer to listen and reflect, that's now included as well. All the links are down below, including a launch video that goes deeper into these themes. There's also a subscriber discount, so hit that button and check it out when you're ready. And just tiny one more thing before we go. I'm building a course on AI fluency, as I am a computer scientist with a PhD in this field, for people who want to understand the technology shaping the next decade. If you want to help shape what the course becomes, I've made a very short 8-question quiz. It's literally going to take you like 2 minutes, and your answers will directly decide the content that I build next. The links to everything are below. I'd really love your input, but now let's dive in. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't really expect Canada to be the country making headlines for industrial cutting this year. Yet on September 9th, 2025, just 2 months ago, Ottawa and Madrid signed an agreement, the GSOA, that gives them something close to a direct line for classified information, industrial collaboration, and defense procurement. If you're outside of the world of contracts and defense lawyers, it sounds super dull. But to think clearly here, you really have to hold two conflicting ideas at the same time. Most of the world's power moves happen off stage, and the most important leverage is not always military. It's who gets to know, build, and supply. Now, for years, Canada and Spain operated under a weaker non-binding system. Barriers, delays, missed chances, but now, Canadian firms can walk right into Spain's defense markets. Madrid gets a front row seat to Canadian raw materials, AI labs, and maybe most valuably, Arctic know-how. What strikes me most here is the symmetry of this. Spain, often overlooked in defense debates, is now becoming the hinge between Atlantic and Mediterranean power. And Canada, usually typecast as a junior partner to Washington, is stepping out, not to rebel, but to diversify. And in this, there is a lesson, in my opinion, that sometimes the safest place is in the center of many bridges, not at the end of just one. Now, there's a running joke in policy circles. Everyone watches Germany, but nobody tracks Spain until the map lights up, right? Spain, for all of its relative quiet, holds the Roa naval base, one of NATO's most sensitive crossroads between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. It's an unassuming place on paper, but in reality, it's a keystone in the alliance's architecture, where transatlantic security ties thread into Europe and Middle Eastern countries, and now, thanks to this pact, even reach into the Canadian Arctic. Madrid's shipyards are not just busy, they are actually strategic, churning out vessels and systems that quietly knit together Western supply chains. The aerospace engineers, the cyber firms, they all anchor a web that runs south into Africa, east towards the Levant, and through the magic of bilateral agreements, north and west across the Atlantic. The joke is that Spain stays out of the spotlight, but in truth, they've actually mastered something else entirely, building the invisible infrastructure of trust. When I look at Spain, I see a country that learned, sometimes the hard way, that the world rarely rewards those who shout the loudest, and instead Spain connects with ports designed for Atlantic cargo, with naval bases that quietly host American destroyers, with industries investing in the next wave of green energy and digital defense. It's quietly impressive, honestly. For Canada, partnering with Spain is not just a matter of gaining market access, but a chance to plug into a living system of innovation and, more importantly, to a different model of power. Not the brute force of domination and military, but the subtle art of strategic embedding. And I keep circling back to this. How many other middle powers have figured out that real power doesn't actually show up in the headlines, but in contracts and protocols? It's in the long tails of logistics, right? The shared training exercises, the legal agreements that survive prime ministers and presidents. Spain's example reminds me sometimes the most influential nations are the ones whose work is felt, not really flaunted and chest thumped. And for Canada, maybe that's the smarter path forward, right? Not to lead every parade, but to help build the roads beneath them. Now, what most summaries miss is the scale of integration here. Canada is not just selling commodities or buying technologies. The GSOA means Halifax shipyards and Montreal Aerospace Labs can partner directly with Spanish firms. Naval modernization, joint cyber defense, advanced batteries, all of this is on the table now. Now, to put it bluntly, Canada just bought itself a seat at a table usually reserved for the UK, France, or Germany. The game is not just about who makes the warships. It's about who writes the protocols for AI, who builds the secure networks, who controls the flows of lithium, nickel, and other rare earths. And the ripple effects are basically jobs, long-term contracts, capacity that can weather not just economic cycles, but the kinds of shocks that NATO now quietly fears most, such as cyber, energy, supply chain. Now, a good critical thinker doesn't just ask what happened, but who benefits from you reacting a certain way. It's tempting to see this as a story about national pride, but the deeper reality is industrial security, right? Spain and Canada are building resilience, not just for themselves, but for the parts of NATO that don't make the news until a crisis hits. And here's where the strategic tension snaps into focus for me. For decades, Canada's entire defense ecosystem ran through Washington, but now with this pact, Ottawa can bypass the US as a sole mediator. American defense firms feel it in the contract pipeline too. US strategists feel it in the dilution of the once unquestioned gatekeeper role. There is no open conflict, but there is friction, and more of it lately, the kind that doesn't make it into the press conferences. And Spain, by diversifying beyond Berlin and Paris, hedges its bets as well. It's a quiet rebalancing, one soft move at a time. And yet I can't help but feel a flicker of admiration for both countries. Canada is not severing ties. It's building options. In a world where over-concentration is a liability, optionality becomes power. By the way, if you're enjoying this, I'd love it if you subscribe. We're trying to get to 50,000 subscribers by Christmas, so please do consider subscribing if you enjoy the content and you'd like to support this goal. If we step back, all of the industrial logic also comes into focus. This is no longer just about classified documents or naval bases. It's about how goods, energy, and data move between continents. Spain's ports and LNG terminals link Europe south. Canada's gas, minerals, and Arctic expertise anchor the north. As climate and politics reshape trade, the corridors between Canada and Spain will determine who keeps the lights on, who can weather a supply shock, and whose industries can pivot when old alliances freeze up. These are jobs in Halifax, engineering contracts in Madrid, new opportunities in Montreal and Bilbao. It's the kind of issue that punishes emotional thinking, but also punishes apathy. The real winners are not always the governments, but the communities who gain durable work, training, and relevance in a global system that's usually indifferent to their fate. Now, there's something quietly poetic in the way this deal came together. Two countries, each long overshadowed by louder neighbors, quietly threading a corridor of resilience across the Atlantic. In my personal opinion, this is how power shifts in the modern era. Not with grandstanding, but with mutual access, leverage, and a refusal to play by somebody else's script. Revisiting the question that I asked you earlier, if you could buy yourself optionality, even at the risk of friction, would you actually take this deal? Or is the price of independence too steep in a world built on alliances? Ultimately, what Canada and Spain are doing isn't just industrial strategy, it's an act of waking up, of refusing to let their futures be decided elsewhere or by inertia. For me, this is a reminder that the most important lever of power is the ability to choose, to walk a corridor that nobody else can really block. Thank you so much for watching. This is House of L, where we stay awake even when the world wants us to drift elsewhere. If this kind of thinking resonates with you, if you want to understand how to navigate the noise, the hype, and the complexity of our current moment, I think you'd really enjoy my book. It's called Awake, the Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Soft Lies, and it's written for people who want to stay grounded, think clearly, and live in reality even when the world makes that feel impossible. I've also now included a 24-minute podcast episode where we unpack some of the ideas behind Awake in a more relaxed conversational way, perfect if you prefer to listen while walking, driving, or just taking a break from screens. You'll find the link down below. I'd love to know what you think of it. As always, thank you so much for being here and for thinking through these questions with me. If you like the conversation, do consider subscribing for more, and don't forget to check out these other videos that I've linked here as a natural next step for a deeper dive.